Leap seconds cause all kinds of problems in our world today. I'm going to explain to you what they are and why they're a problem. So, a long time ago, once upon a time, we have we counted our time with the Earth. This would be the Earth here, and it revolves around the sun, right? And that happens. We define that as 1 year, which is 365 days, and there are 24 hours in a day and 3,600 seconds in an hour. So there are a certain number of seconds per year, per astronomical rotation of the Earth around the sun. However, due to all kinds of different factors like gravity pulling on the Earth and the sun, and due to, for example, the moon's gravity on the Earth and pulling the tides, which changes the moment of inertia of the Earth and how fast it rotates about its own axis, there are all kinds of factors that add variation into just barely changing this, the amount of seconds that it takes to rotate and to revolve around the sun, but it's enough that we can measure it and we notice it. So, in steps atomic clocks. Atomic clocks are just oscillators that they just resonate at a certain frequency, and we use that frequency, we count up to a certain number, and then we define when you've reached that number, that's 1 second. So cesium-137 is the radioactive element that we use, is the most stable element that we've found for creating atomic clocks. So cesium and we create a clock out of this. We create a counter, and this is so precise that it only loses a second every few 100,000 years, something like that. So now we can, NIST, which is the National Institution of Standardized Time, they maintain the definition of 1 second in the United States, and they pulled that from UTC, which is defined in France as the world standard. So this is, the cesium is now how we define a second because it is so precise. There's no variation. However, if you were to subdivide this entire Earth's rotation, or revolution around the sun, into seconds, of course that's a lot of seconds, but you're going to get to the end and there will be a little tiny sliver of round-off error. So what do we do with that error? We can get really, really close, of course, but there's going to be a few thousandths of a second perhaps every year, give or take, depending on the variation that I mentioned that we have here. So the way that we solve that problem is every once in a while, NIST, the Institute of Standardized Time, will announce this year we have a leap second, which means that on the very last second of the year, on December 31st at 12:59 p.m. and 59 seconds, there's another second. So there are 61 seconds in that minute, which is a little bit crazy to think about. And you might say, well, it's just a second. Like, who cares about that? And you would be among a lot of scientists and engineers who think leap seconds are stupid, we should just get rid of them. However, banks get very bent out of shape about this because in that 1 second, worldwide, they make quite a lot of interest. And so you can't just get rid of it. The other reason you can't get rid of it is, so the cesium, NIST, what they run their definition of a second on is, it's UTC, and that's the universal time, astronomical time, and UTC, so the astronomical time is called UT1. These have to be within half a second of each other. We've just defined that tolerance, and for most people that's good enough. But if you're an astronomer, you're serious about astronomy, half a second, when you span that across light years, that's a big difference, and you're going to get all kinds. I mean, you can't measure anything like that. So there's a big difference to some people between UT1, which is astronomical time, and UTC, which is defined by our atomic clocks. So there's half a second of give or take between these two, and when it starts to exceed that, that's when we introduce the leap second. Problem is, we can't predict when the leap second is going to happen. There's a table that has a historical list of all the times that we've had a leap second, and if you go look it up, first of all, it's hard to find, so that's a problem. And second, there's no rhyme or reason to it. The amount of mathematics that it would take to predict all these different factors that influence the variation of the astronomical year is just too great to be able to calculate. So they just measure UTC and UT1 against each other, and when it becomes too great, NIST declares this year we're going to have a leap second, and that causes problems because some people say, well, so there's a couple different ways that you could solve it, right? One is just ignore it. Leap seconds are stupid. But as I mentioned, banks and other people get bent out of shape about that, and you would end up with a huge discrepancy between these two. So another solution is you could have the clock go, 12:58, 12:59, 12:60 on the leap second, so that you have 61 seconds. But most clocks can't support, like if you have an analog clock, for example, there is no way to show the 61st second. So you could say, well, then in that case, I'm just going to hold on 59 for 2 seconds, right? Well, that causes a problem because if you have a whole bunch of, internet data traversing back and forth at 12:59, and then you have another 12:59, so a whole bunch more Ethernet, internet traffic goes back and forth. I mean, it could be Twitter posts, it could be bank data, it could be government information, whatever, really important stuff. But now you have 2 seconds that could completely lose the order of which happened first because they got time stamped exactly the same. So that's a big problem. We can't do that. So what else could we do? Well, you could slow down the atomic clocks to half the frequency for double the amount of time so that the last second of the leap second year takes 2 seconds to complete. And that way you get a continuous time and you solve the timestamp problem. But that means that you have to very precisely adjust the definition of a second. The definition of a second is changing for a second of the year. So that's kind of ridiculous too. So as you can see, there's no great solution to this problem. It has been debated by different time organizations around the world for over 20 years. And every time they get together to argue about it, the same arguments come up and it's just louder. So we need to come up with a solution to this problem. But I hope this little piece of history is interesting to you.